You're a 15-year-old servant in the Vatican, and tonight you've received an invitation you cannot refuse. The Pope's son, Cesare Borgia, is hosting what they call a banquet in the Apostolic Palace. But the older servants won't meet your eyes when they hand you the perfumed note. They simply whisper 3 words that make your blood run cold. May God forgive you. As you walk through the marble halls toward the sound of laughter and music, you notice something strange. Every door you pass is locked from the outside, and the screams you hear aren't screams of joy. Before diving into this forgotten story of Renaissance depravity, if you enjoy learning about the hidden truths of history, consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more content like this. And please comment below to let me know where you're listening from. I find it incredible that we're exploring these dark chapters of history together from different parts of the world, connected across time and space by our shared need to understand humanity's capacity for both greatness and horror. The year is 1501, and Rome is experiencing what historians call the height of the Italian Renaissance. Art is flourishing, philosophy is blooming, and the Vatican itself is funding some of the most beautiful creations in human history. Michelangelo is working on the Pietà. Leonardo da Vinci is painting masterpieces. The world is witnessing a rebirth of classical culture and humanist values. But behind the marble columns and golden altars, behind the magnificent frescoes and soaring hymns, something unspeakably dark is unfolding in the very heart of Christendom. Your name is Marco, though it won't matter much longer. Names have a way of losing meaning when you become property. You were born in Trastevere, the working-class district across the Tiber, to a family of modest means. Your father was a stonemason who died in a construction accident when you were 12. Your mother, desperate and drowning in debt, did what countless mothers before her had done. She sold you into service to pay for your younger siblings' survival. The contract was supposed to last until you turned 18. You would work in the Vatican kitchens, learn a trade, maybe save enough to start your own life. It seemed like salvation at the time. The recruitment happened gradually, almost imperceptibly. You were noticed for your appearance. Renaissance beauty standards favored your type, delicate features, smooth skin, dark curls that fell across your forehead. The head steward began assigning you to serve at increasingly important functions. First, the lower cardinals, then the bishops with wealth and influence. Finally, you were brought to serve at private gatherings in the papal apartments themselves. Pope Alexander VI, born Rodrigo Borgia, is everything a pope shouldn't be. He has mistresses, acknowledged illegitimate children, and an appetite for luxury that would make Roman emperors blush. But his corruption is an open secret in Rome. Everyone knows. No one speaks. The Borgia family has risen to power through a combination of bribery, blackmail, assassination, and strategic marriages. They've turned the papacy into a family business, and business is very, very good. Cesare Borgia is the Pope's favorite son, and perhaps the most dangerous man in Italy. He's brilliant, charismatic, ruthless, and completely immoral. Machiavelli will later use him as the primary inspiration for The Prince, his treatise on power without conscience. Cesare has been made a cardinal at 15, though everyone knows he has no interest in spiritual matters. His interests lie in conquest, both military and carnal. Tonight's event is being whispered about throughout the Vatican with a mixture of excitement and dread. The older servants know what to expect. They've seen it before. They've cleaned up afterwards. But you're new to this level of service, still naive enough to believe that proximity to holiness might actually mean something. The preparation begins in the late afternoon. You're taken to a private chamber where servants you've never seen before wait with basins of perfumed water and fine clothing. They strip you efficiently, clinically, without shame or hesitation. The bath water is warm and scented with oils you can't identify. They scrub your skin until it's raw and glowing, paying particular attention to every inch of your body in ways that make you uncomfortable but that you're too intimidated to protest. The clothing they dress you in is unlike anything you've worn before. It's not the rough wool of a servant's tunic. It's silk, imported from the East, dyed in deep crimson and gold. But it's cut strangely, shorter than is modest, tighter than is comfortable. The fabric clings to your body in ways that make you feel exposed even while covered. They apply cosmetics to your face, rouge to your cheeks and lips, kohl to your eyes. When you catch your reflection in a bronze mirror, you barely recognize yourself. An older boy, maybe 17, watches the preparation from the corner. His name is Giulio, and he's been in Vatican service for 3 years. His eyes hold a deadness that you'll come to recognize in your own reflection soon enough. When the servants step away momentarily, he approaches you. First time, he asks quietly. You nod, unable to find words. Listen carefully because I can only say this once. When we enter the hall, stay near the edges. Don't volunteer for anything. Don't make eye contact with any of the guests. If someone chooses you, don't resist. Resistance only makes it worse. And whatever happens tonight, don't let them see you cry. They enjoy the tears most of all. Before you can ask what he means, the servants return down and usher you both toward the door. You're led through a series of corridors you've never seen before, passages that exist behind the public face of the Vatican. The walls here are plain stone, functional rather than decorative. You pass other servants, other young people dressed as you are, all moving in the same direction like cattle being driven to market. The Hall of the Saints is one of the Vatican's private chambers, decorated with frescoes depicting the lives of various holy men and women. The irony of what's about to happen in a room celebrating sanctity is apparently lost on no one, or perhaps it's precisely the point. The door is heavy oak, carved with religious scenes. 2 guards stand on either side, not the usual Swiss guard in their colorful uniforms, but private soldiers in the Borgia family colors. They're not here to protect the guests. They're here to contain the entertainment. As you enter, the first thing that strikes you is the noise. It's not the quiet, reverent atmosphere you've experienced in other Vatican chambers. It's loud, raucous, filled with laughter and shouting and music that seems designed to mask other sounds. The second thing you notice is the smell, wine, perfume, sweat, and something else, something acrid and animal that makes your stomach turn. The room is filled with perhaps 30 or 40 guests, all men, all dressed in the finest clothing money can buy. You recognize cardinals by their red robes, bishops by their purple. There are also secular nobles, wealthy merchants, foreign ambassadors. These are the most powerful men in Europe, gathered in secret for an entertainment that could never be acknowledged in daylight. At the center of it all, reclining on an elevated couch like a Roman emperor, sits Cesare Borgia himself. He's 26 years old and extraordinarily handsome, with the kind of masculine beauty that makes people want to please him even before he opens his mouth. He's wearing black, always black, a color that's become his signature. His eyes scan the room with the cold calculation of a predator selecting prey. Beside him, seemingly unbothered by what's about to unfold, sits his father, Pope Alexander VI, the vicar of Christ on earth, the successor to St. Peter, the spiritual leader of millions of Christians, is about to preside over an evening that would make Sodom and Gomorrah look restrained by comparison. You and the other young servants, about 50 in total, are arranged around the perimeter of the room. Some of you are male, some female, all young, all beautiful by Renaissance standards, all terrified to varying degrees. The guests are already drunk, you can tell by their flushed faces and loud voices, but servants continue to circulate with wine, ensuring that inhibitions will dissolve completely as the night progresses. Cesare stands, and the room gradually quiets. When he speaks, his voice carries easily through the chamber. My friends, welcome to what I promise will be an unforgettable evening. Tonight, we celebrate not the false piety that chains common men, but the true nature of power and pleasure that is the birthright of those strong enough to seize it. The guests cheer, raising their goblets. You notice that several cardinals are cheering loudest of all, these men who by morning will be celebrating Mass and preaching about virtue and restraint. The entertainment will proceed in stages, Cesare continues, and your blood runs cold at the clinical way he says entertainment, as if you and the others are performers rather than victims. Each stage will become progressively more engaging. I encourage you all to participate fully. After all, what happens in this room stays in this room. Isn't that right, Your Holiness? Pope Alexander VI smiles indulgently at his son. God forgives all sins confessed with a contrite heart, he says, and the guests laugh at the sick joke. The man who holds the power to excommunicate kings is giving permission for whatever depravity is about to unfold. The first stage begins almost innocently, if anything about this evening can be called innocent. You and the other servants are instructed to serve food and wine to the guests, but to do so in ways designed to be provocative. You must kneel when offering a goblet. You must allow hands to wander as you pour wine. You must smile and pretend to enjoy the groping and crude comments. You're assigned to serve a group of cardinals near one of the frescoes. The irony of Saint Catherine of Siena watching over your humiliation is not lost on you. The men grab at you as you pour their wine, their hands rough and possessive. One of them, a German bishop with wine-stained lips, pulls you onto his lap and forces you to sit there while he discusses theological matters with his companions, his hands never still, never respectful. Around the room, you can see the other servants enduring similar treatment. A girl who can't be more than 14 is being passed from lap to lap among a group of nobles. Twin brothers, barely into adolescence, are being forced to dance together while guests throw coins and shout suggestions. Giulio, the boy who warned you earlier, has been claimed by an elderly cardinal who's treating him like a living doll, posing him in various positions while his companions laugh and make increasingly crude jokes. This goes on for perhaps an hour, though time has become strange and elastic. The wine flows continuously, loosening inhibitions that were already threadbare. The music grows louder, faster, more frenzied, and you begin to understand that this opening act is just a warm-up, a way to acclimate the guests to treating human beings as objects before moving on to worse. course. The second stage begins when Cesare stands again and claps his hands. Servants, not the young beautiful ones but older household staff, enter carrying large baskets. They dump the contents onto the marble floor, and you realize with dawning horror what you're looking at. Chestnuts, hundreds of them, scattered across the polished stone. A game, Cesare announces. Our young friends here will compete to gather the chestnuts. But there's a catch. His smile is the cruelest thing you've ever seen. They must do so on their hands and knees, and they may not use their hands. And perhaps, to make things more interesting, they should be unencumbered by clothing. The guards at the doors move forward, and suddenly resistance becomes impossible. You and the others are stripped, your silk garments torn away, leaving you naked and exposed before the leering crowd. Tears are running down your face now, but you remember Giulio's warning. Don't let them see you cry. They enjoy the tears most of all, but it's too late for that advice. Everyone is crying now, even those who've been through this before, even those who knew what was coming. You're forced to your hands and knees, crawling across cold marble while dozens of men watch and laugh and place bets on who will gather the most chestnuts. But gathering chestnuts is barely possible when you can't use your hands, and you quickly realize that's not really the point. The point is the degradation, the reduction of human beings to animals scrambling on the floor for the amusement of their betters. As you crawl, trying desperately to pick up chestnuts with your mouth, you feel hands on your body, guests who have left their seats to participate more actively in the entertainment. Someone yanks your hair, forcing your head up so they can see your face, see your humiliation. Someone else does something that makes you cry out in pain, and the room erupts in laughter. This is when you see him, Cardinal Burchard, the master of ceremonies, standing in the corner with a ledger in his hands, actually writing down what he's witnessing. His face is impassive, clinical, as if he's recording a normal Vatican function rather than an atrocity. Later, much later, you'll learn that his diary entries from this night are the only historical record of what happened here. He described it all in careful Latin, neither condemning nor condoning, just documenting the chestnuts, the crawling, the laughter, and what came after. Because there is an after. The chestnut gathering is merely a transition to the third stage, and this is where language fails, where description becomes impossible not because the acts are indescribable, but because describing them makes you complicit in their perpetuation. What happens next in that room, under those frescoes of saints, in the heart of the Vatican itself, is what powerful men do when they believe they're above all laws, both human and divine. You stop being a person named Marco, stop being anyone at all really, and become simply a body to be used however the guests desire. Your pain is their pleasure. Your degradation is their entertainment. Your humanity is irrelevant. Time splinters into fragments. You remember marble cold against your skin. You remember voices, sometimes commanding, sometimes mocking, sometimes groaning. You remember pain, sharp and immediate and constant. You remember the moment when your mind finally breaks free from your body, floating somewhere above the scene, watching this happen to someone else, because accepting that it's happening to you would mean accepting something too terrible to survive. You remember Giulio beside you at some point, his hand finding yours in the chaos, both of you holding on to each other like drowning men. You remember a girl screaming, really screaming, until her voice gives out and the screaming stops, but she doesn't, her mouth still open in silent agony. You remember Pope Alexander VI laughing, actually laughing, the sound echoing off marble walls. And then, eventually, merciful unconsciousness. You don't remember when exactly you lose consciousness, only that at some point your mind refuses to process any more input and simply shuts down. When you wake, it's to weak sunlight filtering through high windows and the sound of scrubbing. You're lying on cold marble, naked and shivering, your body a constellation of pain. Around you, the other victims are in various states of consciousness. Some are being tended by servants, the regular household staff who've been brought in to clean up the aftermath. Some aren't moving at all, and you wonder with distant horror if they're sleeping or dead. Giulio is beside you, awake, staring at the ceiling with those dead eyes. First time, he asks again, and you realize it's a joke, the kind of joke you make when humor is the only thing keeping you from complete despair. You try to laugh, but the sound that comes out is more like a sob. A servant, an older woman with kind eyes and hardened features, approaches with a blanket and a cup of water. She's done this before, you can tell. This is part of her duties now, caring for the broken toys after the powerful have finished playing. She doesn't speak, doesn't offer sympathy or horror, just practical care because sentiment is a luxury neither of you can afford. Can you stand? She asks quietly. You try and fail, your legs unable to support your weight. She nods as if she expected this. I'll bring a cart. Don't try to move until then. As she walks away, you look around the Hall of the Saints properly for the first time since regaining consciousness. The chestnuts have been swept away. The wine goblets have been cleared. The room looks almost normal, almost holy again, as if nothing happened here. But you can see stains on the marble that the servants are scrubbing frantically, and you know this room will never be holy again. Not really, not after what it witnessed. Cardinal Burchard is still in his corner, still writing in his ledger. He looks up, meets your eyes for just a moment, then looks away and continues writing. You wonder what words he's using to describe what happened to you. You wonder if those words will ever be read by anyone who cares. Over the next few days, you learn the full scope of what you've survived. This wasn't an isolated incident. These parties happen regularly, every few months. Whenever Cesare feels like entertaining his allies and demonstrating his power, the participants are always the same type. Young, beautiful, vulnerable, people with no family connections powerful enough to demand justice, no social standing that would make their abuse a scandal. Some of the victims from that night recover physically and are returned to service, though many are reassigned to positions where they won't be seen by important guests anymore, their beauty now ruined by trauma. Some disappear entirely, and you don't know if they've been sold, killed, or if they've somehow managed to escape. Some die from injuries or infections sustained during the assault, their deaths recorded as accidents or natural causes because no one wants to investigate what really happened. You're one of the ones who physically recovers, though recover is perhaps too strong a word. Your body heals. Your mind doesn't. You start having nightmares that wake you screaming. You develop a panic response to the smell of wine or perfume. You can't stand being touched even casually. The sight of marble floors makes you nauseous. Giulio tries to help in his own broken way. He teaches you coping mechanisms he's developed over 3 years of enduring this. How to dissociate during the worst moments. How to hide your emotions so they can't be used against you. How to make yourself less appealing to the guests who prefer their victims to show fear. It's survivor knowledge, practical and terrible. The important thing, he tells you one night in the servants' quarters, is to never forget who you were before. They want to erase that person, want to make you believe you've always been this thing they've turned you into. But Marco from Trastevere, the mason's son, that person is still in there somewhere. You have to hold on to him. But holding on to your former self becomes increasingly difficult as the invitations keep coming. Because that's the truly diabolical aspect of the system. Once you've been used once, you're marked as available for future use. Your name gets added to a list, and now you're summoned regularly to serve at these private functions. Sometimes it's the Chestnuts game again. Sometimes it's different entertainments that Cesare has invented, each more degrading than the last. There's the horse race where young men are made to crawl on all fours while guests ride on their backs. There's the beauty contest where victims are judged like livestock and prizes are awarded to the winners. There's the night when Cesare brings in actual prostitutes from Rome's brothels and forces them to compete with the aristocratic victims, showing the guests that all flesh is equal when it's being exploited. Through it all, Pope Alexander VI presides with benign amusement, treating his son's depravities like an eccentric hobby rather than systematic abuse. He occasionally participates himself, though his age makes him less active than the younger guests. Mostly he watches and laughs and provides religious absolution for everyone's sins with the casual ease of someone who stopped believing in divine judgment long ago. You begin to understand something about power that you never knew before, something that will shape your worldview forever. The powerful don't just want your obedience. They want your degradation. They want to prove that they can take anything from you, your dignity, your sanity, your humanity itself, and face no consequences. The parties aren't about pleasure, not really. They're about domination, about demonstrating that some people exist beyond all laws and all morality. 6 months after your first party, Giulio disappears. You ask the other servants what happened to him, but no one knows or no one will say. His bed in the servants' quarters is stripped and reassigned within a day, as if he never existed. You suspect you know what happened. He probably reached the point where surviving wasn't worth the cost anymore, where the nightly horrors became too much even for someone as skilled at dissociation as he was. You wonder if you'll reach that point too. But something else happens that changes your trajectory. Pope Alexander VI dies in August 1503, possibly from malaria, possibly from poison intended for someone else. His death throws the Borgia family into disarray. Cesare, who derived his power entirely from his father's position, suddenly finds himself vulnerable. His enemies, and he has many, see an opportunity. Within months, Cesare is forced to flee Rome. The parties stop. You're 17 now, aged beyond your years by experiences that no one should endure. The new Pope, Pius III, survives only 26 days before dying himself. Then comes Julius II, who despises the Borgias and everything they represented. He launches a campaign to purge the Vatican of Borgia influence, reassigning servants, relocating clergy, trying to erase the previous regime like it never existed. You're offered a choice: continue in Vatican service under the new administration, or take a small payment and leave. You choose to leave. You can't stay in these halls, can't walk past the Hall of the Saints without feeling your legs give out, can't serve wine without remembering. With your severance payment, you buy passage on a ship leaving from Ostia. You don't care where it's going, just that it's away from Rome, away from the Vatican, away from the marble halls where your innocence died. You end up in Naples, then Venice, then eventually you disappear into the vast population of Italy, just another broken soul trying to outrun memories that follow you everywhere. Years later, you hear that Cardinal Burchard's diaries have been discovered and circulated among scholars, his careful Latin descriptions of the Borgia parties causing scandal even decades after the events. You hear that historians debate whether his accounts are accurate or exaggerated, whether such things could really have happened in the heart of the church. You could tell them the truth that Burchard's descriptions are actually restrained, that he left out details too disturbing to record even in his private notes. But you don't. You've spent years trying to forget. Why would you volunteer to remember? You hear that Cesare Borgia died in 1507, killed in a minor battle in Spain, his body left unburied in a ditch like common carrion. You feel nothing at the news, no satisfaction, no closure, just emptiness. His death doesn't undo what he did. It doesn't give you back the person you were before that first invitation. The truly horrifying thing you've come to understand is that the Borgia parties weren't unique. They were just unusually well documented. Throughout history, wherever power concentrates without accountability, similar horrors unfold. The names and locations change, but the essential dynamic remains. The powerful use the powerless for entertainment, and the world looks away. You live a long life, eventually marrying, having children, building something like normalcy. But you never tell anyone what happened to you in the Vatican. How could you? Who would believe that the Pope's own son orchestrated your abuse? That cardinals and bishops participated? That it happened in rooms decorated with images of saints? On your deathbed, decades later, you finally tell your eldest son the truth. You need someone to know, someone to bear witness, someone to remember that you were human, that what happened to you mattered even if the world never acknowledged it. Your son listens with tears streaming down his face, and afterwards he promises that your story won't be forgotten, that he'll tell his children and they'll tell theirs, and maybe someday the world will be ready to hear about the horrors that happened in the name of power. But you know the truth. The world is never ready to hear about the monsters who wear crowns and religious robes. It's easier to remember the Renaissance for its art and philosophy, to celebrate the Vatican for its spiritual leadership, to forget the blood and tears that stained the marble floors of the Apostolic Palace. Tonight, if you visit the Vatican, you can still walk through the Hall of the Saints. The frescoes are still there, beautifully restored, carefully preserved. Tourists snap photos and marvel at the artistry. Guides discuss the symbolism and historical significance. No one mentions what happened in this room on October 30th, 1501, or on the many other nights like it. The marble floors have been replaced several times over the centuries. The stains are long gone, but if you listen carefully, if you let yourself truly hear, you might catch an echo of screams that no amount of restoration can erase. You might feel the cold that has nothing to do with temperature. You might understand that some horrors are so profound that they seep into the very stones, waiting patiently for someone brave enough to remember, to bear witness, to say their names. Marco from Trastevere. Giulio, whose last name was never recorded. The girl who screamed until her voice broke. The twin brothers whose names are lost to history. 50 young people whose lives were shattered for an evening's entertainment. They deserved better than to be forgotten. They deserved better than to become footnotes in the shocking but fascinating story of Renaissance success. This is their story. This is what happened when the most powerful religious institution in Europe decided that power placed them beyond all morality, beyond all humanity, beyond all consequences. This is what we risk whenever we allow authority to operate without accountability, whenever we turn away from uncomfortable truths because they complicate our preferred narratives about history and civilization. The Borgia orgies weren't aberrations. They were revelations, exposing the rot that has always existed at the heart of unchecked power. And until we're willing to look directly at that rot, to name it and condemn it without qualifications or excuses, we risk allowing history to repeat itself in new forms with new victims who will also be forgotten, also be erased, also be sacrificed on the altar of power and pleasure. Remember Marco. Remember Giulio. Remember all of them, because they were real, they suffered, and they mattered, even if the marble halls where they were broken have been scrubbed clean and made beautiful again for tourists and pilgrims who will never know the full truth of what happened there. The Renaissance was both miracle and nightmare, beauty and horror, human achievement and human depravity, all existing simultaneously in the same spaces, sometimes in the same moments. We can celebrate its art while mourning its victims. We can study its innovations while condemning its cruelties. But we cannot, must not, forget the price that was paid by those who had no choice in the transaction. This is history's hidden cost, the unnamed, the forgotten, the deliberately erased, all those who suffered so that we might inherit a sanitized past where monsters wear halos and horrors are rebrained as colorful anecdotes from a more libertine age. Marco from Trastevere deserved better. So did you, if you see yourself in his story, if you recognize the patterns of of power and abuse that persist into our own time. May his memory, and the memories of all who suffered with him, serve as eternal warning against the corruption that flourishes when authority answers to no one.